In the U.S., if you're from a rural area and want to move to a city, the authorities won't stop you. But it's a different story in China.
The Chinese Communist Party says it's the party of the farmers and the working class. In the symbol of communism, the hammer represents workers and the sickle represents farmers. But in the largest communist country in the world today, farmers face one of the most discriminatory systems, specifically China's hukou or residency permit system. The regime put it in place to maintain social stability, but it makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for people from rural areas to move to larger cities. Your hukou determines where you're allowed to live. Since around the time the Communist Party took power in China until the 1980s, rural people were forbidden to move to cities. If you were not lucky enough and had rural residency, you were tied to your home village where there could be fewer job opportunities and lower quality education. The restrictions were loosened after China's policy of reform and openness. Hundreds of millions of so-called migrant workers are now allowed to flood into cities to find jobs. But workers from rural areas are still treated as secondary citizens in cities. In some cases, their conditions in their own country are similar to, or even worse than, illegal immigrants in some sanctuary cities or countries outside China. The farmers-turned-workers often don't get proper labor contracts. They have to work longer hours under poor conditions, pay much more if they get sick and go to the hospital because they don't have equal access to healthcare as city residents. And their kids can't go to local public schools. So they either have to go to extremely expensive but low-quality private schools or go back to their hometown for school without their parents to take care of them. Over the past decade or so, the communist regime has repeatedly vowed to reform the hukou system. Some smaller Chinese cities have eased restrictions, but none of the larger cities have. In Beijing, for example, over a third of the population are migrant workers. Due to the city's high property and rent prices, many people live in basements, dangerous buildings, or even makeshift homes. In 2017, a fire broke out in one of those cramped buildings. 19 people were killed, including 8 children. The city government then started a campaign to drive what they call the low-end population, mostly migrant workers in low-paying service jobs, out of the city. That's by forcibly demolishing their homes, leaving tens of thousands of people homeless overnight. Chinese authorities, meanwhile, tightened control of the internet, banning related discussions. One Beijing photographer told the New York Times that the forced evictions made him think of Holocaust movies, in which Jewish people were expelled without a word of protest from onlookers.